Okay, so this is going to be part one, probably the longer of the three parts, covering the material on chapter one. After this, I'll hopefully get the other two short lectures on cyberstalking and fraud posted sometime today or perhaps tomorrow for you to look at prior to class on Wednesday. This particular one obviously is about identity theft, and depending on where you look, identity theft is referred to as one of the fastest growing crimes in America, and it really, if we think about it, probably globally. It's just one of those things that's just taken off, and it also includes a lot of things that we might not necessarily think of as identity theft. So basic objectives: we want to make sure we can define what it is, identity theft, determine if someone has been a victim and what actions that should be taken, identify some methods to prevent identity theft, and then some resources and more information on identity theft. So, according to the FTC, identity theft is one of the fastest growing crimes in America, and that includes stealing someone's personal information and using it to assume an individual's identity, or the fraudulent use of personal information to open new accounts and or purchase items using existing accounts. Identity theft is definitely not a small problem. And again, I mentioned that it's one of the fastest growing crimes in America. Identity theft is ticketed as a big ticket item in terms of money and times, according to Howard Beals, director of the FTC's Bureau of Consumer Protection. Estimated that identity theft costs consumers about $5 billion in expenses annually, and about $50 million to businesses on an annual basis. So, it is indeed costly. If we look at the legislation affecting identity theft, we can look at Identity Theft and Assumption Deterrence Act of 1998, which made it a federal crime. And the definition that they gave is identity theft occurs when someone knowingly transfers or uses without lawful authority a means of identification of another person with the intent to commit or to aid or abet any unlawful activity that constitute a violation of the federal law. And each state has an identity theft law, so the definitions are going to be a little bit different depending on what particular state that you are looking at. If we look at some of the ways that identity thieves would collect information, one of the most popular ones is a very non-technical type of an attack, which is dumpster diving. And here, personal information is stolen from your property, either using rummaging through your trash, or looking through the dumpsters behind businesses, and they can just get a wealth of information, which might be able to be used to open new accounts, or more likely to gain access to existing accounts. Also, one of the things that we talk about in terms of this particular type of avenue is a way to prevent this is simply to use a shredder. It's an absolutely necessary piece of information. It can be used to minimize the risk of identity theft. Be sure, though, that you shred all unused things like convenience cards, credit card offers, credit card receipts, bank statements, pre-approved loans, loan officers, and also canceled checks. Personal information that's collected by businesses is another avenue of potential identity theft, and this is the one that we hear about quite frequently, i.e. Target, i.e. The Marriott, most recently Home Depot. Just as an example, there was a recent event of medical files for hundreds of patients that were found that had been thrown out outside a medical clinic. Identity thieves could have clearly used these files because they contained lots of personally identifiable information, including things like social security numbers, dates of birth. Businesses are required by law to protect their clients' personally identifiable information and to discard these files in a safe manner. Just things happen. Businesses sometimes make mistakes. Sometimes there's a lapse in judgment, and sometimes businesses just tend not to comply out of convenience or because it's an excessive cost associated with compliance. Another way that we see identity theft taken care of, and this is a technical attack, is this concept of phishing. And again, that's creating a bogus website or a bogus email, which is basically trying to use trickery and deceit to entice or cause the recipient or the visitor to the site to give personal information to complete a transaction that the consumer believes is legitimate, but in reality it's a site or an email created by a would-be identity thief specifically designed to collect your personal information. A recent example, again, is the spoofed AOL page, where the individual created an AOL page that looked very authentic, had legitimate hyperlinks as well as wording and a format of what a typical message from AOL might look like. And basically he said that there had been some sort of billing error, directed the individuals to click on the accompanying link, which took them unsuspectingly to the bogus website where they were asked to enter personal information and financial information, which was then harvested and used by the would-be or the identity thief to commit fraud. If we look at some of the laws, federal laws concerning phishing, these are 6 of them. We have the Identity Theft Act, Wire Fraud Act, especially in terms of using electronic communications for wire fraud, credit card or access device fraud, bank fraud, computer fraud, and then the CAN-SPAM Act. All have components of that particular piece of legislation to address identity theft. If we look at some of the punishments associated with that, bank and wire fraud, you can get up to 30 years in prison plus monetary fine. Identity theft and credit card fraud, up to 15 years in prison plus fine. CAN-SPAM Act violations are up to 5 years in prison and fines. According to the Department of Justice, individuals can also lose not only just substantial fines, but also forfeit profit or property that's they may own, or definitely anything that they acquired as part of the criminal act. So if they were purchasing cars or jewelry or homes, those could all be confiscated by the government as well. Another area that we should talk about is this concept of social engineering, which is basically, again, using trickery and deceit to entice an individual or trick the individual into revealing some personal information. It does not necessarily need to involve technology. It could be face-to-face interviews. It could be a variety of different things. This is designed to take advantage of individuals who are not necessarily savvy enough to recognize that the offer that's being discussed or the information that's being collected might not necessarily be necessary to complete the transaction. So how do we prevent identity theft? To me, I think one of the most important areas is education. There's a lot of free services out there and available for individuals through the FTC, the Better Business Bureau. Lots of organizations, banks, and financial institutions do a good job putting out information to their customers about some of the things that they should be aware of to try to prevent identity theft. But there's also a certain amount of personal vigilance that needs to be taken care of. You want to make sure that you check your credit report annually. You want to make sure that you're looking at your statements. You want to make sure you're balancing your checkbook. You want to ensure that your Social Security card has been secured. You don't give out personal information over the phone unless you initiated the call. And when you make online purchases, you want to make sure that you have a secure connection. You want to make sure that the organization that you're shopping with is legitimate, that they've employed the necessary technical controls to prevent that information from being stolen. Obviously, you never want to leave your personal information on a computer. When you open up emails, you want to make, or your regular mail, you want to make sure you shred everything. Don't keep your ATM card and your PIN number in the same location, and as well as, we don't want to publish our passwords. You want to get away from using your mother's middle name and the last four digits of your social security number, or your dates of birth, or your children's names, or anything else that's recognizable, easily recognizable or easily accessible as passwords and pins. And you want to also be aware of fluctuations in your mail. If you are not receiving statements that you normally received, you may want to reach out to the credit card company or the bank that you do business with, and inquire as to what the mailing address is, and if it's been changed recently. You may want to take steps to notify law enforcement and ensure that nothing fraudulent has occurred. Again, I mentioned that we want to make sure that we review credit card statements and bank statements, and look for any checks that may be out of order or are not something that you're familiar with. You want to make sure that you investigate those as well, and then shred expired credit cards before you toss them in the garbage. A couple of other things, depending on where you live. If you live in a rural area, you want to make sure that your mailbox is lockable. One of the ways that identity thieves get their information is they just go along behind the mailman that's making deliveries to roadside mailboxes or street mailboxes that are on the outside of individuals' houses, and they just steal the mail. You want to make sure that any payments that are being made to that include checks, you take to the post office. Don't leave them in your mailbox for somebody to come along and pick up. And then, again, education is absolutely critical. I think that one of the areas that we need to improve on is that public service announcements and notification and user awareness. It would be a big help in reducing this particular crime, because it's very preventable. It's just that people sometimes forget, and they get a little lax. They don't necessarily pay attention to all the things that they should be. It's just out of habit. When you're on the internet, lots of good ways to check the security of websites. You can always look for the VeriSign or a similar logo that will be on the website. You want to make sure that you're using a secure communication stream, and that will be indicated with the HTTPS, or sometimes you can look for the lock that is often found on the bottom of the website. Whenever you're entering credit card information or any type of financial information, for that matter, online, you want to make sure that again it has that HTTPS at the top in the address bar that indicates that the communication stream has been encrypted. I had mentioned checking for the padlock. Unlocked means that it's not secure. Locked means that it is secure. And obviously, you want to make sure that you are using a secure communication stream. If you use Internet Explorer, you want to make sure that you, one way to make sure is to right click on the page and then go look in properties, and when you click on properties, a pop-up window will appear with the information about the site's security. But you can see that even those controls, that's not something that somebody's going to do on an everyday basis. So we need to make sure that consumers are aware that they do have to take some steps to try to prevent falling victim to this particular, what I consider and what many consider a very preventable crime, with the appropriate training and education. If you need to reach out to report this, FTC is the go-to place for a hotline. There you can also get the numbers for the credit bureaus, and there's 3 of them that we encourage everybody to contact: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. And also, you may want to, if you have student loans, reach out to the Department of Education and let them know that you know there may be an issue with your identity. And finally, you want to file a police report. Contact all your creditors as soon as possible. You place a fraud alert on your credit reports, which basically requires them to contact you anytime anyone queries your credit record in an attempt to open up a new account. Not all creditors pay attention to fraud alerts, so you may need to stay vigilant for any new accounts that may be opened as you review your credit statements and your credit reports on a regular basis, at least quarterly. Also, make sure that you put your complaints in writing. We always encourage that any communication as it relates to possible fraudulent activity that you are having with a creditor, whether it's a bank or your student loan, so that you put it in writing and make sure that law enforcement receives copies of all the documents that show the fraudulent activity. Unfortunately, there's no most of this work is going to be on the victim's part. They're the ones that are going to have to be a little bit more or to be actively involved in the investigation. They're going to have to collect the information. It's not something that, unless it's widespread and large scale, that law enforcement is going to get involved in. Banks and financial institutions and other organizations that might be involved will be willing to help, but it's going to be largely fall on the shoulders of the consumer. Again, some good resources, the FTC, Internet Fraud Complaint Center, Department of Justice, Identity Theft Resource Center, all good places to go and look. And one area that you should always reference is the FTC. Again, they were created to eliminate unfair methods of competition, but they've taken on this threat of identity theft. And according to the FTC, about 45% of all the claims or complaints that they receive from consumers involve identity theft. So you can see that it is a major focus of their area. And if you go out to ftc.gov, you will see that they just have a ton of information on identity theft. They offer training seminars. They offer training for both consumers, businesses, and law enforcement, and just a wealth of information from them. The Internet Fraud Complaint Center is a joint effort between the FBI and the National White Collar Crime Center. They investigate complaints of fraud committed over the internet, and they also act as a hub for complaints. And they basically collect the complaints and gives them the ability to analyze data looking for new internet crime trends. And they also make referrals. If a victim contacts them, they will make referrals to the appropriate law enforcement agency as well. Complaints with the Internet Fraud Complaint Center can be 24/7. Victims have come forward from 89 countries. A lot of the complaints, about 2/3, relate to auction fraud, and there's some information on eBay, which is one of the areas that generates a lot of complaints as far as auction fraud. Amazon also is another area that you see quite a few from. We want to look at the U.S. Department of Justice. Also has a fraud section that individuals can go to. Identity Theft Resource Center has a pretty good website with some good resources with frequently asked questions and alerts and information on new identity theft scams. So basically you can see that there are just a ton of resources out there that are available for consumers. It's just a matter of making sure that they're aware of it and can take proactive steps rather than reactive after something. New identity theft law that came out in 2003 was the Fair and Accurate Credit Transactions. Basically, this gave us the ability to review on an annual basis credit reports. And what we recommend is that you do one of the three every 4 months. So you go to one in March, and then you do another one 4 months from then, 4 months then. So it actually gives you the ability to look at your credit report 3 times during the year, as opposed to only once a year. Businesses are required to hide portions of credit card and Social Security numbers on receipts. That's when you get a receipt and it's all X'd out so that your credit card numbers and your expiration dates are not publicized on the receipts. And then they also created a national fraud hotline for individuals to report identity theft. You can go to the National Conference of State Legislatures, and they have a comprehensive listing of all the citations and penalties alphabetically by state, so you can look at that as a good resource. And then, as I had mentioned at the beginning, I'm going to follow up this lecture with a short one on cyber stalking and fraud. Think about identity theft in terms of internet-based. Again, another crime that was traditionally land-based that the internet has just simply made it much easier and more effective to do, minimizing the risk for the individual perpetrator, maximizing the risk for the individual consumer. All right, look forward to hearing what you have to say about this and the other two lectures coming up shortly.